Hey, what's up everybody? It's Kellen here from Start Your Systems, and welcome back to MX Simulator today, where we are going to review the 2020 Daytona Supercross in MX Sim today. I am not going to be playing Monster Energy Supercross this week. I thought about it, doing it, but I tried to build a track in the game. Nothing really works that makes it look kind of good for Daytona, because Daytona obviously being a very long track needs a lot of space to actually build the track. So instead I decided to just take the sim track from last week, which I didn't even get a chance to do a preview video on, and instead make it the review video this week. So apologize for those of you that are more, I guess, happier watching me play the Monster Energy Supercross series, but come here to listen to my commentary about the races. I don't know. I try to change it up a little bit too, so that I get more games involved instead of just the one or two games that I kind of alternate in between every week. Sometimes I don't get any sim content out, sometimes I get only sim content out, sometimes I don't get any Supercross content out or things like that. So anyway, playing sim today. You guys already know the track, you probably watched the broadcast if you're here, so you get the gist of what it's supposed to look like versus what it looks like in sim. This was obviously built before the race happened, so it looks a little bit different, but still a pretty fun rendition of the track here by Race Factory Gaming. And yeah, let's break down the 2020 Daytona Supercross. First of all, I'm going to apologize that I'm a little bit late on this recap video of it this week. It's my birthday today as I record this, so kind of been a little bit busy. Just, you know, we're not busy, but just trying to like relax, I guess, a little bit. I went riding over the weekend, and that was a good time. And yeah, just in general, haven't been super on top of the video making side of things. But back today, going to recap the 2020 Daytona Supercross for you guys. Very interesting race in both classes, I should say. So I think overall that makes the entire race very interesting is what I should say. Let's start with the 450 class because it probably has kind of the biggest bearing on what we're talking about moving forward. Eli Tomac picks up his 5th win of the season, his 32nd career victory, his 4th win at Daytona, and he did it in very impressive fashion. Very, very solid beast mode ride. Eli Tomac, kind of the only guy that can really do that these days type of ride. It was impressive. It was a really, really damn good ride. In terms of like beast mode-esque rides, I feel like I've seen him do some crazier things, but the fact that he was chunking off like 3 seconds a lap at Roxon, like 5 laps to go or so, impressive. Like that kind of stuff is really hard to do. And what's even crazier is that it wasn't like Kenny was way off the pace and suddenly Tomac was just chunking off time with ease. No, he rose the game quite a bit because Kenny's lap times were not fluctuating that much, and Eli started dropping his lap time significantly towards the end of the race. So that was hugely impressive and a tremendous ride to get to him in the first place, but then to fairly quickly get around him. Like, he spent, I think, about a lap and a half behind him. Kenny made a small mistake where he kind of tipped over but didn't, and then Tomac took the lead away. And yeah, this win to me is huge because, like I said after Arlington, that I thought that the series was over already. Like, the fact that we're going into a couple rounds where Eli's already pretty good. Atlanta wasn't like his best round ever, but he's always been good at Daytona. He very well could have left Daytona, like if he had a decent Atlanta and then wins Daytona here, could have left Daytona with a double-digit points lead. As it sits, he's only got 3 points on Kenny, so it doesn't seem like it's, you know, really that far gone or anything like that. But when you start seeing this Tomac appear, that's when you got to start looking out, because that was the Tomac that we saw a lot in 2017 Supercross, in the outdoors these last 3 years. Like, that was what set him apart from everybody else, because even if he doesn't start up front, he can catch those guys fairly easily. I wouldn't say it's like the easiest thing to do, but in the past he's made it look fairly easy. So if we see these rides from Tomac, it's going to be lights out from here on out. But that being said, I will say it was rather impressive from Roxon's standpoint to not lose him this time, because in the past, when Tomac has gone on beast mode level, he normally takes the lead and then opens up like a quick 4 or 5 second lead and is gone, and like there's no chance for retaliation or late race charge or anything like that. He passed Kenny with 5 laps to go. Kenny initially was losing touch of them just a little bit, but then closed it down towards the end. I think Eli was probably coming down from like the beast mode high a little bit, so it was, you know, a double whammy where like he wasn't doing the same laps he was doing before, and Kenny was also still right there making things interesting. So there's definitely that aspect of it, but I think the reason Roczen was so happy is just because he was close enough to, you know, make it seem like it wasn't a absolute demolition ride from Tomac, which in my opinion it kind of was. Like that type of a ride is always impressive. But I think what that's good for is that it didn't demoralize Kenny. Like Roczen still seems pretty satisfied with his race, even though he had a at one point like 6-second lead on everybody and a 9-second lead on Tomac, but didn't win. Like that's a race that he probably should win, but he didn't. I think that's big because mentally it doesn't look like he was defeated by that at all. He looks like he was very satisfied and happy to leave there with a second. He didn't fade near as bad as we've seen Kenny fade in the past little bit here. Like normally he would kind of fall way off the pace, like I said, towards the end with you know, going through EBV and the arm recovery and all that stuff. But I think that was good. So what I like about it is that it really just kind of continues the narrative set where these two guys are going down to the end for a championship fight, and it's going to be good and interesting, and I hope that neither one of them end up injured or something weird happens that it takes away from the championship drama. I just want a good, clean fight all the way to the end and hope that that's what we'll get. And, you know, in many cases, that's not what we get, so I always like when we can take a championship to the final round. One thing I do want to hit on with Eli, and it's a question I would like to pose to you guys. So Eli, he found his beast mode level about 11 minutes into the race. Like that's when he really started turning it on. I'm really curious what would have happened with Tomac had he not kind of just benefited from Barcia and Webb giving him the spots. You know, like Webb made a small bobble and gave it to him. Barcia actually fell and gave it to him. Like if he ends up having to like make an actual pass on both of those guys to get by them and like makes life difficult or harder for him to catch Kenny in that late stage of the race, does he catch Kenny? And the reason I'm asking this question is because we've seen in the past Eli, like let's go back to San Diego, for example. Eli started back, he caught Barcia, he and Barcia went toe-to-toe for a lap or so, and then Eli got around him, and it seemed like at the time when he got around him that it was like, now it's go time. Like he's only, I think at that point he was only 6 or so seconds down from the lead. He was setting lap times faster than them, but then he settled into a groove because he was kind of going back and forth with Justin there. And I'm really curious to know, like, if those guys could have actually ended up battling. I'm sure a lot of people wanted to see what would have happened if Barcia and Tomac had actually battled there. But if they did, what would have happened? You know, would Eli still have found beast mode? Would it have slowed his pace down enough that he wouldn't just straight up catch Kenny at the end? Would it have mattered? You know what I'm saying? Like that, I think it wouldn't have mattered. I think Eli in the second half of the race was, you know, in a different league, and I think he still would have found that. But I feel like that question has to be asked just because, you know, Eli did only win by a half a second in the end of it, and he didn't really have to make or like, I guess, work too hard for the pass, especially on Barcia. Like, I think everybody's assuming Barcia and Eli are going to have it out at some point after what we saw, you know, on the whole Feld Motorsports Monster Energy Supercross post, that them yelling at each other. And Eli came on the Pulp Show and said, yeah, that stuff happens all the time. People yell at each other, yada, 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 so it's not that big of a deal. But I don't know. Like, I tend to think that he's trying to diminish the situation so it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. And Barcia doesn't want to make it look like retaliation, so he's been talking back from it as well. But when the helmets are on and you're on the track, I think things happen, man. I just think that they'll get to the same point of the racetrack. Barcia will not forget how things went down in Atlanta. Eli won't forget either. They'll start messing with each other. I don't know. Like, I just tend to believe that that's not the end of the story right here. Maybe it is, but we'll see. So anyway, that's just a question I wanted to ask. I still think Eli wins that race regardless, but I still would be curious to know whether you guys think you know, him not having to deal with Justin and Cooper in an aggressive sense or anything like that changed the way that the landscape of the race shaped out. Regardless, still a tremendous ride from Eli, and he's definitely looking like he's in a really good position to capitalize moving forward, heading into Indy. Let's talk 250 class now, because I feel like the 250 class is like kind of a big deal to talk about right now. First of all, Garrett freaking Marchbanks just won his first ever 250 Supercross main event. That is incredible. I have no idea where it came from. I really don't. Normally I can be like, I saw it like a week or two before that. He had the speed, he had the fitness. He didn't have a start, or he crashed, or whatever. At no point in these last couple weeks have I been like, Garrett Marchbanks is going to win a race this year. It hasn't dawned on me that would be the case. Has he looked better this year? Yeah, I think so. I think, he got a second last year in San Diego, and that was impressive, but that was in the mud. And he wasn't, I really don't think, special in any other sense last year, except for that second place finish. This year, I feel like he is basically proved he's the better of his teammate, Jordan Smith, who has just had a horrific season. But I think even like speed-wise, it looks like Marchbanks has been better. And yeah, dude, he just came out and made Daytona his B word. Honestly, like that was incredible. He did have to deal with pressure from Sexton. Sexton definitely made him work for it, but those two guys were gone. Like, it wasn't like, Marchbanks held up a little bit of a freight train and just was able to hang on for the victory. Like, Sexton made him work for it, but they were both very far out front of J-Mart, who ended up third. And by the time Sexton like kind of got to him, Marchbanks actually stretched it back out again, and by the end of it had, like a decent little bit of gap working. So I'm just very impressed for Marchbanks, still kind of learning the ropes and stuff like that, to get a win here and feel what that winning feeling is like. He was a very highly touted amateur rider. He won a lot there. So, getting that winning feeling back and knowing what it feels like again, these guys only just want it more and more. And I think he's going to be able to ride that kind of momentum into some really good finishes in the coming weeks. I think the thing that knocks him down eventually is going to be a crash, because I think, for the first time in his career, he's riding at a level that he's not ridden at before. And oftentimes we see these guys, they get to this level, they get the flow going, everything looks to be dandy, but then, one mistake, one tip over, one fall, whatever you want to call it, really sets their program back. And so I think that's what's going to knock Marchbanks down a little bit eventually. But right now, it looks, just uber impressive what he was able to accomplish at Daytona. Led every lap of his heat race, won the heat, won the main. Incredible stuff. And I really, really hope that this turns into, consistent podium finishes in the next coming weeks, because I would really like to see someone like him he's kind of, I guess you could say, not terribly far down in the championship, but it's not like he's right there. If you have someone like him that can come out and win races every now and then and kind of throw wrenches in the plans for Sexton, for McElrath, for anybody else that wants to maybe win a race or thinks that they're in this championship hunt, like an RJ Hampshire, that, this is awesome. Like, this makes things immensely more spectacular to watch as a fan and talk about and all that business. So kudos, Garrett Marchbanks, very well done. On the flip side of that, Chase Sexton is really starting to prove why he is probably going to win this championship this year and defend his championship from last year. And I think in some ways shock the industry a little bit. Not that he wasn't going to be a favorite or a favored rider coming into the series, but you have to remember last year he won his championship by basically not injuring himself. Austin Forkner won every single race on the East except for the showdown before he injured himself in Nashville, and that gave Sexton and Justin Cooper the chance to duke it out for taking the red plate over. But Martin Doblo still won that night. It wasn't like Sexton or Cooper immediately won races right after that. So that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that like he to this point still has not or hadn't proven that he's like the consistent race winner guy that the red plate and the number one plate would kind of suggest. But now he is fully there and firmly there. He is consistently running up front, consistently the fastest rider on the track, always a threat to win. And I think, in my opinion, proving a lot of people that I've spoken to in the industry wrong about his potential on a 450. You watch him ride the bike, he's very, very technical, methodical. His approach to riding and racing is so measured and in control for someone of his age and how little time I guess he's had in the series. You know, we see guys that are veterans that are, you know, either older or much more experienced than him making mistakes that they shouldn't be. And I'll, you know, give a nod to Jordan Smith here, but Sexton doesn't seem to get like overly riled up by a situation or ride over his head. And if he is angry, he knows how to get it back. You know, like he knows how to reel in his emotions and get himself in check. And that's huge because on a 450, you can't like, I guess, award those risks of happening. Like you can't ride over your head to that level and things still go fine, because if you ride over your head on a 450 and you make one small bobble, that one small bobble very quickly becomes a huge mistake and likely a crash. On a 250, I think a lot more times these guys are able to ride wide open and on the limit and kind of corral things together when things go wrong. You just don't have that same comfortability, opportunity, etc. on a 450 to do that. So I think this is already showing a lot of maturity and poise from Sexton's part that he didn't necessarily have it for a win. He was frustrated that he didn't have it for a win at Daytona, but he was still, you know, probably the fastest rider on the track. He was one of the best riders all night long, and in the grand scheme of things, he extended his championship point lead to, you know, even a further distance than he had coming into the race. So, yeah, I think that even though Sexton wasn't too thrilled with finishing second, he has to be happy with where he's sitting championship-wise moving forward, because it was a great ride, a second-place finish, just letting, you know, Marchbanks, you know, feel what it feels like to taste that victory. But I think in Sexton's opinion, he's coming back next week here in Indy, and he's just going to dominate and win, and it's going to be great and all that business. Because right now, that's kind of what it looks like in this class. He looks like the class of the field to me, and he has been extremely impressive. But let's talk about Jordan Smith for a second, just because we kind of do. So I really do love when people fight back when they get pushed around. Like, I don't, as a racer myself, even though this is way different and not on a professional level, I don't personally love getting pushed around, or, you know, even if it's incidental contact, I'm still gonna push back, I would say. And so Smith was battling with McElrath on, you know, basically the fourth corner of the race or something like that. McElrath pushed it into him. It seemed accidental, but he's, you know, still scooted by him and took the lead. And Smith came back in the next corner and kind of made a desperation attempt at a pass, and it obviously ended up very bad for him. It was such a weird crash too, because he didn't look like he was out of shape or way out of control or anything like that. He just kind of got stood up on the wrong side of a sand rut, and it kind of threw his weight off, and then he got pitched forward, and then before you knew it, his leg was stabbed in the ground the wrong direction, and it seems like he's got some sort of knee injury or something like that, but no official update. And that's a bummer, but it is, I guess, the risk you run when you just kind of like use anger or frustration to control your ability. Because if he came back in and just tried to make a measured good block pass a couple turns later, maybe a little bit more aggressive than he normally would do, just because he wasn't thrilled with what McElrath did to pass him in the first place, he probably would have passed McElrath and maybe led that race for a little bit longer. But instead, it looks like he did some damage to his knee and might be sidelined now. So that's what I'm saying about the difference between, you know, Sexton, who hasn't been around as long as Jordan Smith, versus, you know, that experienced level and nature of Smith. And you can see the maturity of Sexton kind of shining through in that situation versus what Smith did. But again, I'm not going to knock Smith too hard, because I get it. Like, I think in most circumstances, people wouldn't have been very happy with the contact that McElrath made to get the lead, whether it's intentional or not. And, you know, I get what he was trying to do, but unfortunately for him, it just cost him there and bit the dust, and maybe kind of took a big bite out of his season as well with that too. So that's a bit of a bummer, but hopefully he's going to get better, and things will get sorted out. One thing I wanted to talk about in 450 class before I leave you guys, I'm going to go ahead and post a link of this in the description below. Justin Brayton came together with Vince Friese. I think it was on the last lap of the race. If it wasn't the last lap, it was definitely like pretty close, like maybe a lap or two before the end. And oh man, was it a brutal looking incident. Vince Friese comes in for the pass after the, you know, sketchy set of whoops that took half the 250 field down in the heat races. Sends it down the inside into that little single into the berm. and Brayton, I guess, wasn't expecting him at all or whatever, but either way, Freeze jammed on the brakes hard to avoid him, high-sided into him, and it turns out he actually broke a bone in Brayton's hand with the contact. And so now Justin Brayton, Honda HRC, is going to be out for the next couple weeks. They said they're going to reevaluate after what would be the Seattle round, so that's 3 weeks from now. That's a bummer deal, but sometimes that's what happens on the racetrack, and I think more often than not, that's what happens when you're on the racetrack near Vince Friese. And again, I'm not going to say Freeze did it intentionally. He was very apologetic after the race, and if you look at the contact, it was, it's like a 50-50 situation. It was like, why were you trying to make that move? But on the same side, I get that you tried everything you could not to hit him once you kind of blew it, I guess, but still, why try the move? I don't know. Like, a couple of things at play there. Brutal incident, but yeah, just keep an eye on the fact that Brayton's going to be out for a little bit. So just adding to this injured list that's astonishingly long, unfortunately. It sucks because you never like to see injuries happen, but it seems like the list of injuries happening that, like, to guys that you wouldn't really be paying that much attention to is staggering. There are a lot of guys going out with injuries right now. Like, even talking about that 250 heat race carnage, Nick Gaines is a guy that isn't going to win a championship, isn't going to win a race, but, was a top 10 guy, and now he's going to be out for a little bit. I think he actually only suffered a broken hand too, which is incredible. Broken hand, broken wrist or something like that. Maybe a mild concussion, I believe, too, but when you saw the way that he got hit, it's kind of almost lucky that it's not more injuries. Sucks to get a concussion. Concussions really suck and have been really hurting people in the sport of late, but yeah, to not have cracked ribs or cracked whatever, that's really good stuff for Gaines. But that's what I'm saying, is more guys like him, more people that we're not talking enough about, are going out of the series, and it's just unfortunate how many people have been injured these last couple weeks. Even talking about concussions, Justin Bogle has now elected to sit out the rest of Supercross because of concussion-like symptoms, etc., because he had a brutal one at Glendale. He's had a couple in his career that have been pretty bad, so he's starting to, unfortunately, have a little bit of the Davey Millsap syndrome a little bit, I think, where his head has been banged around a little bit too much, and he needs longer to recover every time it happens. So Bogle out for Supercross. Bloss fills in at the Rocky Mountain KTM team, the team that he did ride for, but then he went to Rock River. He left a guaranteed outdoor ride at Rock River to go fill in at Rocky Mountain KTM, so that's kind of interesting how that's going to play out. Almost kind of makes me think that Bogle might be out longer than he says, but we'll have to see. And yeah, man, just in general, a lot of injuries happening in the series right now, so fingers crossed that nothing more happens in the series, that our championship contenders in both classes can make it to the end. I want to briefly touch on one thing here at the end as well. The reason I said maybe after Seattle with Brayton's injury is Seattle is kind of a question mark of whether it's going to happen right now. I don't want to get into the politics side of this or anything like that. It doesn't matter that much to me in the sense of this, but this coronavirus outbreak has started to really tear things down a little bit, I think, in terms of a sporting sense. We're starting to see more and more things getting canceled, more and more events, cons, whatever you want to call them, going by the wayside. And namely, it's happening in Europe. GPs are getting postponed. The MXGP of Trentino and the MXGP of Argentina have now both been postponed, so the next GP won't even be until late April, which is crazy. We're seeing, soccer matches get canceled. All of Italy is basically in quarantine right now. I have no idea what's going to happen with Formula One and MotoGP. Like, MotoGP had the Bahrain Grand Prix canceled for MotoGP. They still did Moto3 and Moto2. Now the Circuit of the Americas race has been canceled, which is slated to go, I think, the end of March, but now it's been pushed back even more. So it's really affecting a lot of things in Europe, but Seattle is one of the few areas, and Washington State is one of the few places in the country right now that has kind of, I guess, been hit the most with coronavirus. And the governor of Washington has started to crack down on some public gathering type things. And I don't know which way to side with it right now. I would not be surprised at all if Seattle ends up not happening, or at least being postponed. But where do you postpone it to? Because they don't have much time to push into the Nationals. The National Championship is going to happen at the back end of it. So I think Seattle, honestly, if I was putting a little bit of money down, because I'm not a betting man, but if I did, I'd say Seattle gets canceled. So what we're looking at then is, instead of 7 races to go, 6 races to go in 450s. And then in the 250 West class, that brings us down to 3 races left to go instead of 4. So just something to keep an eye on. Again, no official word, no real confirmed anything, just some rumblings around of what's been going on in the Pacific Northwest and how things are being handled with this coronavirus thing. Again, I'm not going to get into what I think about the whole thing, but this is clearly going to be something that will be talked about and could be an effect on the series moving forward. So keep an ear out for that, keep an eye out for that, whatever you want to say. Just something to maybe keep in the back of your head moving forward here as we close down on the Seattle Supercross in a couple weeks. But anyway, appreciate you guys watching as always. Hope you guys enjoyed the recap video. Again, I apologize, it was a little bit late. Hopefully you guys can forgive me. But as always, love you guys stopping by, watching, having a good time. Hope you guys enjoyed the recap this week, and hope to see you guys in all of our future videos here on the channel. So Kellen signing off for now, and I'll see you guys in the next one. So long for now.